That's a huge robotic announcement. Enabling sound. Hey, we've got 3 people. So like this is the first class I think where everyone's actually turned up. Good work, guys.
Is everyone here? No.
Yeah. Oh no, it's just the 3 of us. So no, one person is missing. Still, that's pretty good odds for
Oh, nice.
for these things. Alrighty, guys. So starting off with how did we all go over the term? Sorry, over the break, making sure that we've learnt all of these things. Like, what have you been doing with your practice?
I could have practiced more. I did practice though.
Yeah. When you practice, what did you practice?
I was practicing like what I emailed you about, like
Right.
just
Yeah.
trying to solo over the chord progressions.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, can you show me some of that? Like, how is that working for you?
So I'm trying. I've memorized all like the triad like places,
Nice.
and like when I realized that like all the triads just fit into like one shape, that I can just like arpeggio along the entire thing. I'm like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. Now I can
Yeah.
see the like more shape.
Yeah. There is an exercise I'm thinking about handing out, like, uh, which is essentially, you build these triad things. It's almost like a singing exercise. Using all your inversion shapes, you can climb the neck in 3 octaves. Like,
Honestly, like I need to do more practice like that, because like all I've been practicing is like doing the why is there no sound?
I heard. Oh, I mean, I heard it, but I heard it, I think, acoustically.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Something along the line stopped working.
All right, all right. While you're checking that, Blake, what about you, man?
I like Renrick, I could have done a lot more practice than I have done.
Yeah.
I worked most every day throughout the break, so I was
Yeah. Okay.
really like exhausted when I came home. But what I have been practicing is just going through scales, trying to build up speed and a little bit more technique.
All right.
Um,
Can you? Well, could you show me some of that? Can you put the camera on?
I haven't got a camera at the moment because I've left my laptop at my partner's house, so I'm on my
Ah,
PC without camera,
right,
unfortunately.
right. I can understand that. I've got a really powerful PC. It's like a gaming laptop that's really good and no
Yeah,
camera at all. And I
yeah,
got it so I could do like mixing and just crap on it, so it's really powerful.
yeah. That's exactly
um,
what I did.
yeah. Okay. Well, when you say you're practicing to build up speed, how did you do that?
Um, more so just the positioning of the wrist, because I remember during one of our
On
first lessons, the right wrist, the picking wrist,
right, right.
how you tilt it up to go up and tilt it down when you're going down to sort of slice through a bit easier.
Yeah, there's some special rules with that.
Yeah.
Um, so really, you don't necessarily do it for direction. You do it for pick stroke. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So like if you're doing upstroke resting, then you should be tilted this way. If you're doing downstroke resting, you should be tilted that way.
Yeah.
And it's actually it's quite a good exercise to force the opposite. So like we start a scale going downstroke, that inclination. Well, try it inverted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really weird. It is worth putting in the time to getting at least mostly comfortable with that. And the reason I would say that is because really, as you're improvising, you don't necessarily always follow the direction your hand's going. Quite often, I end up working it out that I make that work and follow my hand direction.
Yeah. For sure.
But there are lots of times when suddenly you're in an upstroke position and you want to go up. So you have to push through that.
Yeah.
So you do want to make sure you practice the other side of it too. So when you say you were working on it, what were you doing?
Um.
Obviously, other than looking at it as you play and thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Pretty much just sort of like getting that mind muscle connection of like knowing that my wrist is turned a certain way when I'm going a certain way, and trying to rest, like make a very conscious effort to rest on the next string as I'm playing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Um,
initially too, that might make your hand tenser because you're
yeah, a bit.
probably pushing your hand further than you normally move it if you're a person that has been
Yeah,
playing double escape a lot.
I realize
Um,
I go through and I play more with my elbow at a
yeah,
certain point as opposed to flicking with the wrist.
yeah. And look, there are people who play elbow driven. They're usually dudes who are more ripped.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing I don't like about it at all is its gross motor function, right?
Yeah.
Gross motor function is not accurate and it is not fast and it is very fatiguing.
Yeah.
So putting it into smaller parts of your body are usually better. The other thing is too, if you get really good at the wrist movement, we can actually use the gross motor function to give the wrist more energy. This is a secret that mandolin players know about how to keep a tremolo going forever. It's also a secret drummers know. Like, I don't know if you guys have done any drums. Drums and studying the technique of drums and studying the way they study rhythm is so valuable for your guitar playing because drums focus so much on relaxation and whip motions, right? Whip motions are this kind of motion, right? Where your forearm kind of picks your wrist up, but you can see that my wrist does this kind of flop, like the cracking of a whip.
Yeah.
And that is really important on drums because it means that in this tiny movement, we can get stupid amounts of power. And it's very conservative. I'm using barely energy to keep it up. Well, that whip motion is the same motion we use to keep our pick going. So when drummers do things on one hand, you learn, say, what's called a downstroke, a full stroke, and an upstroke. Right, so we're hitting in two directions. In between that, we can do tap stroke. All right, and you think you're gonna get tired tapping that fast because if I just do this,
Yeah.
you'll get tired, right? But what is happening is the whip is actually giving me energy to carry through.
Yeah, that momentum.
Yeah, it gives you just a little bump in energy. So if we're doing a tremolo for a long period of time, it's directly analogous. If I try to do a tremolo like this, I know that's using the door knocker, we don't use that, but even trying to do this, where we're just doing a little bit of back and forth just in the wrist, you will tighten up quickly. But if you say 1 in every 4, give yourself a little nudge from that whip motion, you'll keep it going longer. And smoother. So I'll zoom. I don't know how closely you can see that.
Yeah.
It's this little tiny movement I'm doing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's just adding a small amount of a whip. The more of that whip you add, the more of an accent it will be.
Yeah.
But it will keep your tremolo going for a long time. And I don't know if you've ever asked yourself that question, like, how does a mandolin player tremolo for 4 minutes straight? Because I do it for 30 seconds. You know, Dick Dale, you know, all of those kind of things. Like, how do you keep the tremolo going? Well, that's how. You're actually being very economic with your movements. And if you can't do that, it means that you aren't supporting the tremolo in that way. You're just trying to muscle through with the one picking motion.
Yeah.
And almost any motion we do ad nauseum is going to be fatiguing. So something to think about too is those little whip motions to keep the energy going on the picking hand. Another thing I would add to practicing in order to develop speed is you should always do it at subdivisions.
Okay.
So like throw on a metronome and, for example, right, here's 60 beats per minute. We are going to do a drill in a second. You might do an exercise where you start on 8th notes. Triplets. 16ths. All right, 6-tuplets. Right. Once you can do that and you can transfer between them, I would also sometimes include pentuplets. They're much harder to count out and they're kind of an irregular grouping. It's worth looking at. Once you can do those, and you can do it relaxed and repetitively. So the first thing I would suggest when you're trying to develop speed is not to develop speed. It's to sit at 60 beats per minute, and even at 6 tuplets, you know, yakata dakata. That. You might have noticed my accent was changing because I was putting the accent on the first in every 6 tuplet, which means it actually moves which location in the bar the accent is going to be on. And also, if you are turning around like I am, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So the 6 ends there, then you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. So the accent note keeps moving. And that's really important. That is really important to developing fluidity with your right hand, is tracking those accents and making them noticeable. Now, when you can do that at 60 beats a minute and you don't tense up at all, and you can do it for, say, 3 minutes straight,
Hmm.
that's when you bump the timing up. When doing it for 3 minutes does not cost you anything. You're like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
And that feeling of I've got this is what we're looking for as we increase the speed. One problem if you just try to drive for speed is you'll quite often solve this problem with tension.
Yeah.
So you want to try to make sure that you're always operating inside of that comfort zone where it feels like jogging, right? Like you could push this, like I could probably push this to 100 beats per minute, and that's when I would start feeling like jogging.
Yeah.
And that's the place where I need to practice more. 100 beats at 6 tuplets is probably. Let me just find out if I can demonstrate it. 100 beats at 6 tuplets is actually fairly quick. Yabba dabba yabba dabba yeah. So that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And that is a jogging pace for me. So I would continue to work on that for like maybe a week until I feel like I'm totally in control of syncing that up, and I'm totally in control of keeping that clean. And then obviously like pushing it faster. And that's still not like, that is not the fastest I play, but it is probably the fastest that I have total control on, a total understanding. And this is a thing that you need to know about yourself if you want to play flashy lines, is there's going to be the tempo that you know you are rock solid at, and then you might add 20 beats a minute to that once the adrenaline hits you at a concert. But past that point, it is going to get shaky. And that means that your lines are going to sound less controlled, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. One of my favorite guitarists growing up was Jimmy Page, and when he does the really blinding stuff, he doesn't feel controlled, and that lack of control actually adds to the musical nature of what he's doing.
Yeah.
Whereas you compare that to Eric Johnson, Joe Von Massa, who are never not in control, and their lines have a very different sound. So these are the kind of considerations you want to make about speed. And what I would constantly say to people is, make sure you do it on subdivisions, so that way you're also drilling this rhythm thing, and you're drilling into your body, like, this is how I cut this beat up accurately.
Yeah.
And then also it gives you a video game number. Like, I'm on level 100 right now. If I push it to 100, you know what I mean? Like, it's a cool way of tracking your progress.
Yeah, that's fun.
And you can take the tension out of it, because I am not pushing to be sprinting all the time. I am pushing to make my comfortable expand.
Yeah, because I've noticed when I might get a little bit overzealous. Like when I start hitting something, I get it really well once or twice, and I'm like, oh, hell yeah, this is fun. Let's bump up the speed. And then I get really uncomfortable with the scale I'm playing. I start hitting the wrong notes, getting out of time.
Yeah. So you got to take more of a Zen approach and be like, I'm hitting this, great. Can I do this for how long?
Yeah.
Right? Like, instead of bumping up the difficulty by doing it by speed, do it by length of time that I can hold this.
Yeah.
Because it's going to show the flaws in your technique. I found, because there's beautiful metronome on YouTube, the one I keep using because it's got a woodblock sound. I like the woodblock rather than bleeps and bloops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Using this one, the videos go for 10 minutes. And what I was doing when I started doing this stuff was like, all right, can I do it for the whole video? Which is surprisingly difficult to stay focused for 10 minutes on one exercise.
Yeah.
And the other thing it starts pointing out is the weaknesses in your technique, because you'll hit minute 3 and you're like, why is my right hand cramping? If your right hand is cramping, you're not doing this with a relaxed motion. You are holding tension somewhere. And it can help you track it down. Weirdly, and this is going to sound like an ad for Blue Chip Picks, the other thing that helped me track down the problem with Blue Chip Pick, I'm not saying you guys all need to go out and buy it, because it was stupidly expensive. But it's made out of a special polymer that feels kind of completely frictionless against the strings. And once I picked this pick up and started practicing, I realized, oh crap, my right hand, right, any fatigue I feel now is from my technique. It's not from my picks dragging on the string and causing drag, which is making my muscles work harder.
Yeah.
So there are some things like that you could also look into to really push speed. Because now when I pick up another pick, my technique is much better. So when I pick up another pick, I can still play pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So maybe think about getting a pick that is really smooth so that it doesn't bite the string. A lot of like nylon materials are chosen to actually break. The reason you choose a nylon pick is because the edge breaks down and wears down, and that uneven surface gives you a rasp on the note, which can make things sound more aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, like the famous Jazz 3 pick that there's so many famous players like Eric Johnson love, is a nylon small pick of that's pretty hard. And it has a real point on it. So the combination of a nylon that breaks down and gives you a rasp on the string, a bit like Brian May's using a threepenny bit with all the crenellation kind of things around the edge of the threepence. It gives you a rasp into the note, and then that point gives you a real click
Yeah.
departure. Like the different shape of your pick tips really make a difference too. So some things to think about. I would definitely make sure that you were practicing this with a pick you cannot bend. If you're doing
Yeah.
this with something thin, it's just not worthwhile.
Yeah, I've got just like a 60 mil one at the moment.
Whoa, what? 60 mil?
Point 60, sorry.
Oh,
My
0.6.
bad. 0.6, yeah.
I would bump that up. I would bump
yeah.
that up.
Imagine actually playing guitar with a brick.
Yeah.
Like, well, have you seen those what are they called, like dragon heart picks?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Oh, I've
say,
seen
I
them.
always wanted one of those, but they're like $80. They're
It's like
ridiculous.
$10 for one of them, and I'm like, I'm not forking it over. I can't.
Massive.
Okay,
massive.
this one was $100 sent to me,
Ooh.
right? Because it's $50 in postage. Why didn't they just put it in the goddamn envelope? Like, seriously, $50 on postage on something this size. But the polyamide that this is made of, for about an A4 size sheet, is $1,000.
Yeah.
It's a polyamide that's used in high friction, like centrifuge bearings and things like that, chemical resistant applications. It's clearly some engineer who's like a hobby guitarist came home with a lump of centrifuge. I was like, I wonder if this would make a good pick. But for something that's much cheaper that does a similar thing, Altex is a really cheaply available, very smooth. Yeah, those Altex picks. I think John Petrucci is the dude that really pedals Altex.
Well, like a pack of 10 of them. I'm like, these are really good. I really like these.
Yeah. I was really surprised. A student left one in a room one time, and I was just like, oh, I wonder what that's like. And picked it up. I'm like, you know what? As far as the cheap pick spectrum goes, that's a good choice.
It's nice hard, and it's really smooth.
Yeah.
You don't feel it.
Yeah, and for me, that's stuff I really, really like. And of course the material makes a difference. I don't know if you've watched the whole Troy Grady thing where he goes into chirp and how the different pick materials actually make different sounds. The harder the pick you get, the more chirp you get, and chirp is R2D2 noises, right? If you want to hear them really good, go to your bridge pickup. Anything where you like, harmonics, anything that vibrates on really short waveforms, or if you're trying to do it over the pickups themselves, the bridge pickup's your best choice. It's the only one that really heals them all. The neck pickup, if I do this, you can hear that actually what I'm hearing most of is the string over here, because I'm actually making that sound behind the pickup. Whereas if I go here, you start hearing a lot more of the R2D2 noises. Okay. So we should probably start the lesson. We're now 20 minutes in. So
20 minutes in, starting about guitar picks. Nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, my job is kind of partially supporting you guys in that almost conservatorium way, where it's like we're supposed to be giving you feedback on your actual playing and developing you guys as players. So it's all relevant. But I also have kind of generalized coursework to get through. Okay, so really, really, really quickly, 2 drills that we will definitely start with next week. And we're just going to do a quick cycle of them this week. Is just as a refresher, we're going to do our inversions on the DGB strings. Okay, so we all remember all these? This should be a pretty easy revision.
Another thing for me, I also missed, I think, every single small group lesson after the mid-semester break.
Right.
Because of a work commitment that I tried sorting out but never ended up sorting out.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to ask if there's a way I could get the worksheets sent to me.
All you got to do is email me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I'm really terrible because today there will have been I think 10 or 15 students, and I've got some of my private students and home students. It's really hard for me to remember send this person this thing. So if you send me an email, I'll definitely do it.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'll do that after the lesson.
What I might even do actually, because all of these. Oh man. Oh no, good. I am recording. Whoa. Thought for a second I'm not recording. If I don't record the lessons, the uni doesn't think these lessons have been done.
Oh,
And I have to upload them. So if you guys want access to the uploads too, I'll send out all the links for
yeah, that'd be perfect.
the folder, so you can go back through this whole lesson and watch it again and do
Yeah,
things.
that'd be amazing.
Cool. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to throw on a metronome. You guys should mute your mics so you can play along. That way we don't have to hear everyone else's time lag. You just have to focus on my sound. And at 60 BPM, we're just going to go up and down on those inversions, right? So first inversion, second inversion, root inversion, first inversion. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm cutting these ones a little short because we've spent the front half of the lesson doing some other things. Okay, so now minor inversions. We take all the 3s and we flatten them, right? Right. I really strongly suggest that you think of this with all of the D string notes being rooted with your third finger. It's kind of like a jazz player thing where quite often they'll find chord shapes where one finger is consistent throughout everywhere that you're doing all the inversions. And that allows you to keep a lot of stability in your hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if either of those were a real challenge, then you need to do a lot more revision on them. The more and more and more and more you can know these triad shapes, know them inside out, learn how to think about them in different ways, the better and better and better you will get at the kind of the nuts and bolts of improvisation and composition on this instrument. Okay, so one last exercise to take a look at is doing the D to B string. And we're going to do 6 notes out of each pentatonic box. We're going to start here in box 4 with a C-shaped box. Sorry, I'll just turn this metronome off for a second. And it's going to look like this. Double up on the top note, come back down. Double up and come back up again. Now, what's really important is that you sight the note you're going to transition on. So while I'm here, I'm kind of not thinking too much about what my fingers are going to do, especially when I'm up on the tail end. I'm imagining the note I'm moving to. Sorry, it's going to be this one. So, right. So it's always the second note you play. That's going to be the note of the next group of 6. That's going to be the note for the next group of 6. That's going to be the note for the next group of 6, right? Okay, so I've been changing up what I've been using as the rhythm for this. If you are you guys pretty confident with your pentatonics? If you are, I would do it in triplets. If you're not, 8th notes would be a better thing. But let's have a look at triplets. You can always try to use it as a target thing. Open up the lesson again and see if you play through it. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and oh man, whenever I'm every time I play that exercise, this exercise I'm actually I've done a fair bit and I'm usually pretty good at. But when I'm teaching it and I've got a camera on me, there's a certain point where I start getting in my own head, like, oh man, you're following that click, you enough on it, and I'm making a little mistake. And, oh damn. All right, so everyone can come back on audio-wise now. There are a couple of things to add to your practice routine. I mean, it's amazing actually how much I'm being asked about ways to transition through the scales, exercises to do that kind of thing. That's quite a good way of doing it. This will develop into those kind of Joe Bonamassa, Eric Johnson-y kind of things. And it also is getting you to really think about the scale in a different way. I'm sure that most of the time you don't practice going, just these 3 strings, up and down, Okay, so onto the actual sheet. If we have a look at this sheet starts up the top with the infamous tetrachord diagram. Learn to love it, learn to get obsessed with it. It's super handy. And it's the easiest way, I think, of memorizing intervallics inside of a major scale. And if you know the major scale, you can adapt out from there. Like it's like the major scale, you add a flat third, you add a flat 6. Okay, now we've got harmonic minor. So what we're going to do is take our triads. We scroll down to the first piece of music on the page. We're going to take the triads and we're going to build pentatonic around them. What I would like you to do is think about finding these notes by a distance away from a triad note. Yes, it will construct a pentatonic scale. Yes, you probably already know that information, but it's worth bearing in mind which notes are which ones are the triad notes, which ones are the extension notes. So if we take this first inversion shape, all right, we want to add to make it pentatonic. We've got 1, 3, and 5. In order to make it pentatonic, we want 2 and 6. All right. An easy place of finding 2 and 6. 2 is a tone above 1. 6 is a tone above 5. So we start 3, 5. We go a tone up to go 6, 6, 1, 3. All right. This all also boils back into the one thing that I wish someone had really driven home to me when I started learning to read music, which was use all of your theory information to support it. If I look at that first cluster of notes, I see C on top. I see it's a first inversion. It's going to be that. It's going to be this. Sorry. Right? It's going to be an organization of a C first inversion with and I know my C first inversions. So it's like I don't even have to read that. I only use that as a suggestion for what I'm doing. All right? Then we look at, okay, the E, the G, and the C. Well, we already know those on the music. We need to find a note that is just after G. Oh, well, it's going to be the 6, right? Because music always tells you the scale, all right? And if they want to move anything to be any kind of accidental outside of that, they throw accidentals in. So we want to go to the 6. It's a tone above 5. And then we play root, and then we do 9, 2, right? All All right. When you practice this kind of thing, I think it's really good to start and end on your triad. All right. For the reason that if we just hang there on the 9, that's unresolved. There's inherent tension left there. And one of the things that you really need to become accustomed to is feeling that tension. If I'm leaving it on that tension, I better hope that what I want is that feeling of tension. Otherwise, it should be resolved. Back at the triad. All right, again, we see second inversion. G on the bottom. There's a G. There's second inversion. It could be here. Could be here. Doesn't matter. We all know our second inversion shapes, and hopefully you know them all over the neck. So when you see that, you go up to C second inversion. I could read it here. I could read it here. We're going to do it all on the DGB strings. I'm just pointing out that you want to take these exercises elsewhere too. And again, okay, so we want to move. We want to find the 2 and the 6. Well, here's 5 in the bottom. It's the second inversion. 5's in the bottom, so we go tone up to A. You want to practice saying your notes as well. All right. Then we go to 1. And we want to go to 2, or a 9, so that's a tone above that. Then we go to E, and just so all of them had 5 notes, I also put the G in. So if you're on the major third and you want to find the 5th, you want to go up, A minor third. You'll also recognize this pentatonic box. Everyone recognizes this one. All right, so bear in mind, you still want to do the whole. All right, driving home this idea of resolution. All right, and finally, up here in root position. All right, and here's where we get some interesting options. All right, if we follow the same tone up rule, we're going to get this. Well, have a look at my finger here. So we're keeping that triad down. We go a tone above the root. We run up the triad. And then we go a tone above the 5th. Unusual fingering, right? However, if you play it and allow notes to sustain, we're left with a really nice 2 against 3 suspension. It sounds kind of pretty. And this is where we start understanding that fingerings can also dictate sounds. All right? If you like dissonant or chords with a rub in them, and I certainly do, what you really want to think about in a lot of your extensions is how can I put the extension so that it rubs against something else in the chord? If we do that another way, on the guitar, for any string that's in fourths, another way of finding a tone is go up a string and down 3 frets. If it's on the GB pair, it's going to be up a string and down 2 frets because the GB is tuned in a third. So we could do this, which now looks much more like a standard pentatonic box that we're familiar with. So root, up a string, back 3 frets. And this is the John Mayer. He always does that kind of thing. But playing them in this order means that if we sustain the notes, right, what we actually do is lose the suspended sound and replace it with a major sound. We move from suspended to major. In the other one, we move from major to suspended. Well, not suspended. Add 2 in this instance because we have a 3 as well. So fingerings are going to be important for determining the certain sound colors you use. Okay, moving down. I am moving through this fairly quickly, but you guys will have the thing to go back over it. And you'll have a couple of weeks to look at this stuff. So here what we're doing in the next section is doing less information, right? Instead of focusing on adding the 6 and the 9 all the time, we're just going to add one of them. All right, and the importance with adding just one of them is that we start getting familiar with those sounds. So here in root position, we need to add the 6. A 6 can be found a minor third beneath the root or a tone above the 5th. So first off, we see the root inversion chord. Then we see the 2 6 that we're going to add. two A's. One way of finding that, right, would go, here's my root, I'm going to go down a minor third. That's where a 6 would be. All right? Or alternatively, here's the 5th, go up a tone, that's where the 6 would be. The next, you guys at some point are going to learn the bebop scale. I can't remember if it was last semester or this semester. So I've written ones that have this many notes, so the extension in 2 places, in a bebop arpeggio pattern. So that's where we start on an upbeat, we do a triplet, and end on an upbeat. So we're going to get 3, 4, 1. It's a cool sound. Ba, 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 da, ba. All right, you'll hear that a lot on a major 7 too, as a side of line. Yeah. All right, so down in first inversion. Interestingly, in the first week, I actually had made a mistake when I'd copy pasted all of this stuff from the program I was writing it out into this document, where I'd gotten all the first and second inversions on the wrong lines. Nobody pointed it out. So we'll see if anyone actually picks that up from the first week's classes. Okay, so yet again, 1, 3, and 5, we want to find the 6. A 6 can go a tone above the 5th. So we're going to add this A in. Play it as an arpeggio. Right. All right, now we're doing it in second inversion. This time the 5th is in the bass, so it's going to be a tone above that one. All right, now we move over. So now we do the other note from the pentatonic. We're going to do the 9, starting in root. We kind of already went over this, so it's going to be a tone up. Now, if you do it like that and sustain all the notes, like I said before, we get this 2 and 3 clashing over each other, which I think is really pretty. You know, if you want something to be pretty and twinkly, that's a nice way of doing it. Alternatively, now that sounds bolder and stronger because we end on the major chord. You know, this, if we're getting, you know, descriptive about it, maybe that's the more heroic one. It's very solid when we end. Whereas this one sounds delicate because we lose the root and we gain the clash between the two. Okay, moving it into first inversion. We're going to find the 9 by going a tone above the root, or we could go a tone below the 3, which means we've got 2 places we can do this in the bebop pattern. Sorry, you're doing a chromatic, which is cool. That's major third, minor third. We want to go open, which would be the 2. Alrighty, last but not least, second inversion, 2. Now this is another instance where you choose the 2 does interesting things, right? The 2 could come up a tone from the 1, and now we have the Steely Dan. These add 2 sounds. They're often referred to as the Steely Dan chord. Steely Dan uses a lot of these where they have the 3rd and the 2. Especially if you listen to something like Ricky Don't Lose That Number or half the things on Asia. You're going to get these kind of sounds. Now, that's very different to what a lot of people play as a sus chord, which would have the 2 down here, a tone below 3. Right? This is a much more normal sound, or one we hear a lot more often. But this is quite cool too. Again, that 2-3 clash sounds nice. Okay, so why these chords? It's at this point we're going to take a little detour and say that we're going to break up chords from here on out for this semester into 3 different categories: major, minor, and dominant. Anytime you see a major chord, try throwing one of these in. It's really that simple. These are the blandest extensions. You know, they're still quite pretty. I'm not being down on them, but they are the ones that are just easiest to work. So if we're in a C chord, why am I defaulting to all these like country sounds? I have no idea. All right, throwing them in, that gives me a little bit of movement, a little bit of stuff to play with, and it doesn't fundamentally change the intention of the chord. All right, we can do that in any position. Right? Playing around with that as an idea, anytime you're now looking at a chord chart, anytime you're looking at a song, try it out. You know, try putting in 6s and 9s on just major chords. All right? We're flipping over to minor now. And in the minor world, 6s and 9s are really, really dramatic. All right? If we do a C minor 9, that's kind of a heartbreaking chord. So I'm doing C minor, flat 3, G is the 5th, D up here is the 9. All right? 9s are dramatic when it's a minor chord. 6s, here's a C minor 6. We take a C minor shape, and we take the root down a minor third. We find the 6. All right, and it's a dramatic sound yet again. You know, unless you really, really want something to be dark, that ain't a chord you're going to be throwing in. However, if we do a minor 7, it actually softens the chord. Here's minor. If we then take that to minor 7, we actually make it less dark. It smooths the chord out in a way and makes it less dramatic. And that's because we essentially take it to being just an inverted major chord, right? The notes of, say, C major 6 would be C, E, G, A. The notes of A minor 7, the relative minor, would be A, C, E, G. In other words, the only difference is what's in the bass. All right, so this is, we learned just then, that's a C6 arpeggio, isn't it? It's also an A minor chord. We can see that by looking at it. All right, A minor 7 has the G in it. So what's the difference? Fact of the matter is, there isn't really any difference. You could choose either one. There is a slight tonal difference by what's in the bass, because what's in the bass is an important thing to think about. You know, if we're just thinking about our standard inversions for a second, a good thing to come up with is kind of a personality for your inversions. Root inversion, to me, is the blank one. It's the one that's just the default chord sound. Second inversion, I think of that as the warm sound. If I want to take just a plain major chord and warm it up, that makes it kind of this, you know, fireside chat version of it. Third in the bass actually sounds fairly dissonant. It is a way of making that chord sound more dramatic and kind of darker, because the third is inherently dissonant. So by putting that into the bass, we hear more of that dissonance. All right, these little things, these are the observations that you need to start making about these chords, because the more you can describe it to yourself this way, the more you will use them. The more you're in a song, you're like, oh, actually, you know, this is the bit where everything's getting closer and climb down. You know, maybe I want to make that in second inversion, so that way it makes everything feel warmer. You know, sometimes certain inversions feel really good moving into each other. Like here's F first inversion. This first inversion into root inversion for the 4 chord sounds great. Right, and it sounds very different to that compared to So, oh man, we are running short on time on this one. Okay, real quickly, I'm just going to cover the rooting versions. You guys, yeah, we'll just do the rooting versions for this one so we can get on to the next part, which I think is actually a little bit more important. Do go through them, do the same exercise. We're just figuring out where the 7s and the 11s would be against each of these triads, okay? So, C minor 7. The 7 is going to be a tone below the root or a minor third above the 5th. All right, so we're going to get, this is another one of those bebop triplet ones. Now, the astute among you might notice that that is the same shape and exactly the same pattern that we used for a C6 arpeggio. But now we're calling it C minor 7. Why? Well, because we're thinking of this as being the root, sorry, the root inversion, rather than thinking of basing it off a second inversion. There's always this relationship between relative major and relative minor where you'll find they're all parallel fingerings. In fact, if I did this exercise so that we were doing A minor 7 and A minor at 11, you realize that all of these patterns are actually the same. Right? So your C add 9 arpeggio would be the same as your A minor at 11. All right? We're talking about the ones that are easy to add. The extensions are technically the same note. Okay, C minor at 11, we take a C minor. And we find the third by going up a tone from the minor third. So we get, which also kind of looks a bit like F sus, right? All right, so it's worth going through those and taking you through, making sure you find the other extensions based off those minor shapes, making a map in your mind of, yeah, these are the ones that I can add in most of the time. All right, coming down the page for our last, 10 minutes. Have you guys got somewhere you need to be immediately afterwards?
No, not at all.
We go like 5 minutes overtime or something? Cool. Okay, so coming down the page, we start talking about building lines. All right, these are some general guidelines on building lines, right? So here we've got resolutions usually occur on the beat, tension on off beats. 1 and 5 are the most common resolutions or the most solid resolutions. 3s give the chords color. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like if I'm going, we know it's some kind of C chord, most likely. We don't know what kind of C chord until I play the third. That third really told us a lot. If I do this, we're clearly in minor. Right, so that third is really important for some basic information about the chord. Notes outside the triads are often used as connection between triad notes. Now that could be connection between triad notes of the same triad, like here I am on F, and I'm sitting on F for 4 bars, or however long, so I might say, so I'm just using those extra things to step notes in between the notes in the triad to give me some movement, to give me some color, to give me a bit of tension. Because without it, we can make music, but it's music that has no tension in it at all, which kind of feels like a nursery rhyme. All right. One other thing that I'm going to actually talk about for the first time up the front of the lesson, up the front of this section, other than halfway through it, is this idea of melodic mirroring or melodic sequencing, which is we've got to have moments where we reflect previous bars in the music. We could do that by doing literally the same patterns, maybe we on the different chords, so 1. And when I change chords, right? So in that instance, I am mirroring both the melodic pattern, so the intervallic pattern, as well as the rhythmic pattern. Whereas I don't necessarily have to do both. I could just do one. So if I go, Well, now that pattern mirrors it rhythmically, but I'm not hitting the same intervals from inside the chord as I am when I'm doing the 1 chord. The 4 chord now, instead of going root, root third, root fifth, is going fifth, fifth, root, fifth, third. What I could do, that's borrowing the rhythmic pattern. I could borrow the melodic pattern, but change the rhythms. Right? That creates interest, doesn't it? Because I'm using the same intervallic pattern. Our ear predicts that, but now I'm changing it up by changing the rhythm. So that is the unexpected bit that gives us interest. All right? It doesn't have to be either one, but generally you need some kind of mirroring to be happening. All right. If we scroll down and we have a look at the nearness of you, Hoagie Kaimarkle, we could start analyzing this melody. So let's see if they follow any of these rules. Is there anything we pick up here? Starting in the anacrusis, F, C, G. Already, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? F, C, A. Sorry, C, F, G, C, F. I was just teaching a bass lesson, so like I'm reading. I've really messed up like how I'm reading all these things. C, F, G to start with. Well, C, F, that's the 5-1 from an F chord, right? In other words, second inversion, right? We put in 5 in the bass. And then why don't we play A? Right? That would clearly match the chord. It would be okay, surely. This anacrusis, which is the little introductory bit at the start, is clearly on an F chord. But why don't we do it? Well, it's because the melody note is A. If it was C, we might do it. Feeds us right into that, doesn't it? But it's not. We're trying to hit A. Pale moon that excites me, that thrills and delights me. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. It isn't your sweet conversation, right? So because we're trying to build up to that A, we've got to use something outside of the triad. We've got to create tension because we want that A to feel good. And if we build the tension by using something slightly unexpected, i.e. something not of the triad, it means that when we resolve on beat 1, it feels stronger and more interesting. So instead, we bridge the two. What's the note in between F and A? Well, G. And that feels nice. All right, A here, that is the third of the 1 chord here, of F major. Great, that's a really strong chord. It's telling us the color of that. Just with that alone and a bass note, we know we're playing a major chord. Fantastic. Okay, then we get up to C, the 5th, B flat, the 4th, and then back down to A. This is kind of an informal rule, and one of the things that you have probably come across a lot. If you play your 4th, you pretty much have to resolve it to your 3rd. There are obviously exceptions to this rule. There are ways of making it work where you don't do that. But a good rule of thumb to start off with is if you play your 4th, it's got to go back down again. Right? It has to resolve. And that's because the 4th, you might notice that the 4th is not one that was included above in the easy notes to use for a major chord. The 4th is much more dissonant. It creates a hell of a lot of tension. So, right? It's got to go down. It's got to resolve. In this instance, there's another reason for it too. If we look at the first beat of bar 2, we see C minor 7, and the note we're trying to hit is G. All right, well, G is good. G is one of the solid resolutions. It doesn't really emphasize the color of the chord, but that might be a good thing here. Emphasizing the color of the chord might sound odd because we're on the second half of a word. We're at the second syllable of a word. Right, so using the actual 3rd from C minor, E flat, might be a tad jarring. You know, right? You might notice that includes a tritone. Anytime we use that tritone, like tritone is a dissonant interval. If we use it to travel, it's going to sound dramatic and dissonant. And I think that's going to be very strange. It's not the pale moon that excites me. There you go. Excites me. It's war. Kind of saves itself in the sense that the sights and me would then resolve by a fifth, so that's okay. But it did feel really strange and out of key because it's also a note that is not generally in the key, right? C minor 7 in this instance, you may realize, is the 5 chord made minor. All right, and what we're doing is a 2-5-1. We're actually already in bar 2. We're going, I'm heading to B flat major 7. So what I'm going to do is 2 and 5 from B flat in order to drive the change to B flat. Because, of course, F7 is also not in the key of F major. F major 7 is, but a dominant 7, that contains E flat, and that's not something in the key. So here we start at, so that first bar again, from the 3rd up to the 5th, 4th to 3rd, which is kind of a rule, and then one of the pleasant notes on the C minor that still kind of fits in with the key, G. Then we come up to this B flat again. Now the B flat relates to the C minor 7 by being the minor 7th. Well, that's good, it's a chord tone. But we are also playing the globalized 4th of the key, and especially in this melody, we keep hearing this. So it's likely that the next note is going to resolve out. Remember that the B flat now, because we're in beat 2, so we got sights, B, that, aha. So we had this F7 sus 4 from the melody, and we're resolving it down to the 3, just like you kind of always do. Then we change chord. F. F to a B flat major 7. Well, that's the 5th. Great. Then we go up to the major 7th. Well, the major 7th is a chord tone. The accompanying chords does say play a major 7 here. It's also a note we've come back to a lot, right? We're still using melodic mirroring. The A has been common in almost every other bar. You know, and we keep having this pattern. You might have noticed it by now. We keep building up to a note and falling down. We keep building up to a note and falling down. We keep building up to a note and falling down. And that is the pattern across this entire melody. That's how they're using this melodic mirroring, right? They keep doing this kind of thing. It doesn't have to be on the same notes, but because it is a pattern that we can predict as a listener, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, ba-da-da-da, bi-da-da-dum, bi-da-da-da, bi-da-da-dum, right? So major 7th on that A. Then we play a G. Now the G is really interesting against this B major 7. Anyone tell me what the G is against B flat major 7? Sorry, anyone tell me what the G is against a B flat chord?
All right. What was the question again?
So what is a G against the B flat chord? Well, what you should do is figure out how far away it is and see if that jogs any memories. So start on B flat. How far down do we have to go to get to G?
Minor 3rd.
Minor 3rd. If it's a minor 3rd below the root, what kind of extension is it? We've already covered this today.
For the name. 11?
6.
6. Shit.
6, right?
Oh, yeah.
We went through this today, right? The 6 is one we can throw in. It's kind of a safe note. Right, well, they're using it here, all right? They had to use something else. If they use notes from B flat major 7, right? Almost all of these notes, except for the B flat, clash against the B flat diminished that is coming up. However, the G note, if you think of this instead of B flat major 7, that's a major chord, well, the 6 is appropriate. So we think of this as a common tone between these two chords. It's G, which means that by using it, it's going to feel less dramatic when we move to an extremely dramatic chord. Like diminished chords always have this, whoa, especially as this diminished chord uses a lot of notes that aren't in the key. All right, C sharp on top. All right, tritone in the bass. We've talked about how tritones, they're dissonant sounding interval. So by using that at the end of the B flat major 7 bar, we're kind of pre-introducing a nice way of stepping to the diminished chord. If we use, say, F, we'd get this, and that kind of chromatic movement, that's very dramatic. It would make the D lights feel, D lights me, it's almost Phrygian-y kind of, a little dissonant. So using the G here softens it somewhat and makes the melody flow kind of transparently into this chord rather than making it sound dramatic. We continue on, we go back to the G, and then we hit the F. Well, the F against the B flat is extremely dissonant. But that's fine because we're building tension to resolve to mi on the C note, which is a C in effectively the bass of an A minor chord, right? Which means that we're essentially making that A minor chord a C major chord, right? That's the 5 chord, and that is a very strong resolution. So it's making that feel stronger, feel more in key after we just had the stuff that was really dissonant. And this is another thing that we're going to see. We usually flow from dissonance to resolution. If we use something interesting, we probably want to say, it's okay, don't get too scared afterwards, right? Last little bit, if we look at this last bar, because the anacrusis at the end of the last bar is the same as the introduction. We have G minor 7 here. And we're playing, over the top of the G minor 7, we're playing the notes D, E, and F. Well, D, that's a 5th. E is a 6th. Now, on a minor chord, that is quite dissonant. It's quite dramatic, but we immediately move on to the F, which is the minor 7. So really, that moment of dissonance only creates interest in the line, and we don't sit on it long enough. Especially, you also notice it's not on, it is actually on a downbeat. Oh, yeah, it is on a downbeat, but we move off it very quickly. Right? So that means that the 2 notes we hear the most are 2 notes from the chord. Then we get G, F, E. Well, in the middle of that triplet is the F note. The F note is the 4 of a C chord. But again, we resolve it straight out to the 3rd. You might also notice that we've just had a bit where we go up and down. Well, in this melody, if we go up and down, we then go back up. And quite often by a leap, too. There's usually a do-ah. So we leap up to the U here on C. So why is this kind of analysis and thinking about it important? It's because these are the rules that you need to express when you improvise. All right? There are guidelines that are really helpful. But this is why I keep saying to you guys, like, for now, your improvisation shouldn't make you sound anything like a rock star. It should make you sound like you're just building basic melodies. Because if you could internalize these rules, focusing in on resolution, focusing in on, did that create some kind of movement? Did it push a chord change? That's what's going to improve your playing a millionfold. All right? Because what you end up doing is training your ear and training your hands to understand these resolutions, and you bring that back into your other playing. So your pentatonic shredding then has a point. All right? And the only way of getting it is by targeting it specifically. So you write out a chord progression, and you go, on this chord, I'm going to use this note from the triad. On that note, I'm going to use that note from the triad. And the time in between is spent bridging those 2 points.
Yeah, I get it. Because like what I've been practicing is just trying to bridge the 2 chords and then doing what you told me to like see if you can hear the chord change without playing the chords in the background. So I'll have like a and then I'll try and like bridge that C and the F together with like with the stuff, and I'm like, this is too much for my brain.
Yeah, one thing with that demonstration is I would find them both in the same position.
Yeah,
I would
so like
also,
there's the C and the F are like right next to each other there.
yeah,
So I'm always like,
yeah, you want to focus in on those resolutions. You also like I would keep it small, keep it on a couple of strings, keep it on 3 strings. There's an exercise that anyone who's kind of rung me up to just have a chat outside of these lessons. A lot of the exercises I give them will be this one that I think of as like this classical exercise. We take A minor, and we then go to the 5 chord. 5 chord would be E7. Right? There we go. If we're going over 3 strings, it'd be that. Otherwise, it can just be done with 2 strings. So if it's just the 2-string version, try this. That's your A minor. Your E7 is this. Yeah, and what you do is you focus in on the resolutions, right? So to me, if you start arpeggiating this stuff, it immediately sounds like rock music or classical music. Right? And you just find all of the different pathways that focus in on the different resolutions. The strongest ones are usually ones that are semitone apart.
like the one here and the
Yeah, that one or this one. From the 3rd of the E, right, up to the root. Another one that's kind of fun too is going from the flat 7 down to the 3rd. It's a tone apart. But right? And on 2 strings, it's really, really easy to focus entirely on just listening. You want to make sure you can hum these changes. So that when you're playing this arpeggio, so I'm hearing the right. Right, came up to the 3rd instead of going down to the root. Right. It's a really great exercise. It's a really easy thing to do, and you can do it anywhere on the neck. You just find 2 chords on 2 strings, minor and the minor 1 and dominant 5. I think is really easy to focus on. It's very dramatic sound, and I think a lot of the time in this early process, you really, really, really want things that are distinctive, things that are easy for your ear to latch onto. If you're practicing like a 2-5-1, a lot of the time we'll do 2-5-1s like. And I actually think it's easier to learn how to capture chord sounds if you do them with more extensions. All right, because if I do that, this 5th for this E7 flat 9 falls chromatically, and that's really distinctive. Down to the 5th from the major 7th, right? So if we use that as a roadmap, they're the ones that I have to use, so I can fill in the gaps with whatever else I want.
So find the standing out note and then use that as a lead.
Yeah, you use it as a construction around your melody. You're like, okay, that's the ones I have to hit, and now I can fill in the others however I want. Okay. And you can target a different one each time. It doesn't have to be the same. You might do something like. Oh, sorry. Keep it to the same 2-5-1. Right? It just makes your melodies pop and sound cool. So the more and more of that you can do, the better. Which is why you might notice that I've hit the triads so hard. It's like, these are your good notes. And then we've got to think about adding a note to that in order to then create a little bit more interest rather than things
Honestly,
that are just
like it's crazy thinking, because I used to just do pentatonics and then try to just solo pentatonic and it's just the same sound. But now I'm trying to think like, okay, now follow the chords. I can play pentatonic still, but as long as I change the root of that pentatonic chord, it sounds better.
Oh yeah. I mean, like with a lot of my private students, we don't have enough time to dig in. Like with my private students, I usually dig in with 6 or 7 different angles of thinking about these things. And it's funny because at certain times you're more receptive to certain ideas than other ones. Which is the very hard thing about this kind of thing in a uni, where it's like, no, we got 5 lessons in a test, so you got to like cram the shit out of it. Whereas when you're kind of studying this with a person informally, you have a lot more time for it. So one way I investigate this is saying, okay, we take chord shapes. We do the Hendrix rhythm method. You take chord shapes and just associate a pentatonic box with it. All right. So like when I play this chord shape, I play box 2. Right. If I then move to a different chord shape, well, that's box 4 pentatonic.
That's what I was doing with the when I figured out that the root on the low E fits in. Yeah. And then I can, like, if I want to move that up to,
Yeah. Now, one thing I would suggest is try to keep them close to one another. One problem with trying to make a melody that jumps from, say, if we're doing 1 to 4 in G, and we're doing it like this.
Yeah, it's really jarring. It's hard.
It is, and it's very hard to make the melody.
Like we had I think improv practice, and like I was playing the chords. It was like C, F minor, and it was like E. No, that's not E. This one, and then G.
Well, it's the 2, and then 5. Yeah.
I was like, okay, how am I gonna make this like closer together?
Yeah, the way I would suggest you do that is more about what we did today. So if we were looking at this G to C change, right? If we do it here, just as a triad, right? All right. Now this is a movement you need to get used to. I mean, pianists do this all the time. So we're sitting on a G chord. You ever wonder what a pianist is doing, where they're sitting on a chord, but they seem to be rocking backwards and forwards between something? There's a question I always had. I worked with a lot of pianists, and I'm like, oh, that's what they're doing. They're doing 4-1. If you think of something like Werewolves of London, was it? Okay, me. Right? Real standard thing. It's also the Start Me Up lick. Right? Who's that guitarist? The dude from Rolling Stones. Keith Richards. There we go. And you can combine them. So like a fun thing to do on a 12-bar blues that uses your inversions is to do cycle 4s as your backing riff. So if you're in an E key, right? And like you got that massive start of a 12-bar where you've got like, it feels like a million bars of E. It's 4 bars, but sometimes depending on how fast you're playing, that can feel really slow. And instead of just doing, we can do things like this. So what I'm doing there is cycle 4s, D, A, E. Right, which could be done this way too. D, A, E. And you just find that all over the neck. D, A, E. These shapes repeat. D, A, E. All right? And they're cool sounds. They're cool sounds you can just kind of throw in. And it's a great little practice for your triads. Yeah? Yeah. So anyway, how do we diverge into the cycle 4s exercise? Right, so if we're talking about just constructing simple melodies, I would start here, G and C. Choose one as your target tone, maybe this and this. All right. Couldn't help myself, went to the 5 chord. But you can see what I'm doing, right? I'm just targeting this note while I'm on the G chord, then I'm going to change to the C, so I'm going to target this dude. Yeah.
And then just figure out when to swap over. Yeah, it's like how I was doing with those things.
And I break it down into small bits. And after you do this, and you feel like, yeah, I got this, and I know they're going to sound like basic country melody kind of things. Well, then we do it up and further in the neck. G here and C here. Right, like you're not after things that sound crazy crash hot yet. That will get more and more interesting the wider you can make these ideas. But you start them really small and just see if you can make anything that sounds like music. Yeah. The next exercise, you might say, okay, well, I'm going to use G in 2 positions, and then go to C. There's my change, right? Built up to the 3rd of the C. Then our 5. Yeah, I know. I remember because I didn't really start thinking this way until I started teaching this course. Really, it was one of those things that I had in the back pocket of, this is some crap you have to do, Alex. You gotta work on this stuff. And I just got lazy about it. And I was like, well, I'm going to start teaching a whole classroom of kids to do this. Maybe I should do those exercises too. So what you can see for me is not just obviously my 20-something years of experience, but 3 years of practice on these concepts and how that's developed into my playing. All right? The more you focus in on this stuff, the more you learn that this is all you have to do. In order to get better and better and better at improv, you need to focus in on these things. And then what you can do is work on expanding your definitions out. Yeah, maybe when I'm looking at a G chord, maybe I choose to play some other chord against that G chord because it gives me extensions off that chord, rather than playing just the plain G, because we know that if we play plain pentatonic, plain G against G, it has not very much tension, but very consonant. It does sit in very well. But we don't always want that. Sometimes we want things to sound more interesting. So we might start playing E minor against a G. Right? E minor is good.
I think I find my biggest problem is that I keep thinking of I gotta use the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right now, and then I'm like, shit, where do I go?
Yeah.
I gotta just stick with smaller sections.
Yeah. Start small. It's very easy to start small, and the thing you have to get used to is giving up that it's going to sound like guitarists you like or like a genre. That's not important right now, because you will have the command of doing that once you've done the basics.
That's the thing. I can, when I'm trying to improv, I can hear I'll go onto a note and be like, okay, I can hear this wanting to go this way, but I don't know how to get to that.
Well, a real simple solution is sing the note out loud and find it. And that's advice that couldn't take you very far. That advice alone. If you hear the next note, sing it and find it.
That's what I did when I was practicing the all the scales.
Yeah.
I would practice it
Yeah. Honestly, just singing along with your playing is one of the best practice things that everyone could add now. And if you can hear the resolutions, right, you're already halfway there. The problem is that the kind of practice that you do in order to bring that into your hands so it's reliable does not sound like the kind of music you want to play right now. So you just got to give up with that. You're like, no. It's like I'm going back to square one. It's going to sound like a nursery rhyme. Who cares? If it sounded like music, I get full marks. If it sounded disjointed and non sequitur, I don't get any marks. All right, guys, I've held you back now for 20 minutes, so this has been
Sorry, I started the conversation after the class.
No, I'm more than happy to do all that kind of thing pretty clearly. But I am conscious that you guys might have things to do, and also that this recording is getting very long.
Don't you have another class after us?
No. I've done my 3 today, and then I have a couple of lessons this afternoon with some of my private students.
Nice. So we can do this. in like 2 weeks from now, I can like hold us back another 20 minutes.
Yeah, I don't care. Like we can do that. You've got questions. It's not a bad place to.
We can get more content for our pick
Honestly.
podcast.
Yeah, like I don't care, man. Like what I care about is that you guys come out of this course with information that is useful to you.
Yeah.
You might have got that impression already because like I have honestly spent hours and hours outside of this answering people's emails and.
I saw Brody emailed you about like something, and then he was like, "Oh, he hasn't replied yet. It took you 3 days, and you wrote a 2,000 word like reply."
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, we were measuring it, and we're like, "What? This man wrote an essay already, just like to get you practice material." And we're like, "Jesus Christ, oh no."
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is I care a lot. I care a lot more about passing on the information than I actually care about the kind of the roles of my job or how to make money out of it. That is not a good attitude to have if you want to make money out of music, by the way. Ethically, I can't get myself out of it because fundamentally it's hard to kind of drive myself to give a shit about the money more than any of the other things. And the thing I care about the most is making sure that you guys get something out of this. You know? Anyway, so yeah, I don't care. You want to do 20 minutes chats after the lesson, that'll be fine. It will mean that there'll be 20 minutes of extra video at the end that you can kind of sort through of random stuff that won't be related, but
Well, we'll just know the last 20 minutes is like the ad libs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this one starts, I think, with the front 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes, then we do kind of like an hour of content. In
First 20 minutes, guitar picks.
Yeah. Hey, look, it's really important, right? Like, that's definitely a thing that we need to think about. These are all things that we need to think
The only
about.
thing I don't trust about getting a really expensive guitar pick, like I'll sneeze, drop it, and it's gone.
Yeah, I gotta say, I did weird transitions. I don't know if you know vegan picks, Wedgen picks. They're $4 each, which I thought at the time was like, whoa, $4, geez.
No.
So when I had those
for
picks,
a pack of 6.
yeah,
I don't have that
exactly.
kind of money.
I was like, when I did that, when I started buying more expensive picks, I got really good at not losing them. I think I lost a couple of vegans, but like I then got in this pattern of like I always know where my pick is. So I got prepared for buying this stupidly expensive pick, which means that every now and then though, because like I don't know if you guys have these habits. I don't even necessarily consciously track them. Sometimes the pick will go in my hand, in my pocket, and sometimes it'll go in my
And
strings.
you don't know where it is.
Yeah, and there's a couple of times where I go to open my case, I'm like, oh shit, where's my $100 pick? I was at the uni today. Did I leave it at the uni? Crap, I'm never going to find this thing. And it's like, no, calm down. Search all of your pockets. Oh yeah, there it is.
This what happened once. I had a pick with like a design from a show, and I got it at like a convention, and then I didn't realize I handed it to a guy to use real quick, and I never got it back. And I'm like,
it is risky. Like I only hand this to students when I'm like with them and watching them. I once handed a pick that I was using in high school to a friend of mine. He's just like, oh, you got a spare pick? I have one. I'm like, yeah, man, here you go. Because I used to carry like 10 picks or something in my wallet.
Yeah.
And when I got it back, it was wet and covered in all these dimples.
Oh.
I'm like, what the hell happened to this pick? He chews his pick. I'm like, yeah, you can have that pick, mate. That's fine. I don't need that one back. I don't need like, that much of a record of your bite and incisor marks.
That is not fun. Yeah, I feel like a pick with that. I do the same thing. I end up putting it in my mouth when I'm doing other things. And I'm like,
I'll do the balancing it on your lip thing, but like his was all the way in and chewing.
Yikes.
And I'm like, for one thing, do you really want all that saliva over your strings?
Yeah.
Like, God.
How would you put it all in your mouth? I just put it like on my teeth, like on the edge, and I'm like,
I'd be paranoid about swallowing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like, you know how like sometimes you have like an ice cube in your mouth because you've been drinking and you're doing something else. That's, oh, that slipped down. That's what I'd be paranoid about a pick doing.
Yeah. You can't lose a pick if it's with you, inside you.
Yeah, keep the pick inside you guys.
Yeah, there's the spirit.
Alrighty, so no more comments?
Yep.
No, all good.
Alrighty, well, as you know, get any questions or whatever, hit me up during the week. I'm going to send out an email that has the link so that you guys can all visit the video.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, all right, well, let me know how you go. See you guys in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alex. See you, man.
No worries. My pleasure.